Hello, everyone. We welcome you to our Sunday morning roundtable discussion on Sunday, November 22nd, 2020. We welcome you all. We are recording from the Plainfield Christian Science Church Independent, Plainfield, New Jersey, the United States of America. Thank you for joining us. All right, we will start today with Florence and our morning prayer.
I'm reading from Miscellaneous Writings and Christian Science versus Pantheism. Beloved children, the world has need of you, and more as children than as men and women. It needs your innocence, unselfishness, faithful affection, uncontaminated lives. You need also to watch and pray that you preserve these virtues unstained and lose them not through contact with the world. What grander ambition is there than to maintain in yourselves what Jesus loved, and to know that your example more than words makes morals for mankind? Let us not forget that the Lord reigns, and that this earth shall sometime rejoice in his supreme rule, that the tired watchmen on the walls of Zion and the true Christian scientists at the foot of the Mount of Revelation shall look up with shouts and thanksgiving, that God's law, as in divine science, shall be finally understood, and the gospel of glad tidings bring on earth peace, goodwill toward men. May our Father, Mother God, who in times past has spread for us a table in the wilderness and in the midst of our enemies, establish us in the most holy faith, plant our feet firmly on truth, the rock of Christ, the substance of things hoped for, and fill us with the life and understanding of God and goodwill towards men. Mary Baker Eddy.
Thank you. Beautiful. Okay, watching point.
Watch number 309. Watch that you hold a scientific thought as to the kind of body Jesus had after the resurrection. Was it spiritual or was it material? Man never has but one kind of body. It is the material sense of it that is unreal. In an early edition of Science and Health, we find this statement: the heathen gods of mythology were as real as our bodies are. After the resurrection, the disciples still saw Jesus' body as material, while he knew that it was spiritual. On page 218 of Miscellany, Mrs. Eddy writes that the spiritual body came with the ascension. Yet we find her saying that he reappeared as idea. The conclusion must be that body is to us as we regard it. Viewed materially, it appears to be matter. Yet science teaches that there is but one body, which is spiritual. If Jesus healed the sick by beholding the perfect man, he must have beheld his own body as perfect and spiritual also. Mrs. Eddy once said, quote, "There is no space for a material body to occupy. There never was 1,000 years ago." End quote. See Miscellaneous Writings 70, page 70, line 22. And then from Miscellaneous Writings, on page 70, that line reads, "The thief's body, as matter, must dissolve into its native nothingness, whereas the body of the Holy Spirit of Jesus was eternal." End quote.
Thank you. Comments on that?
I felt like this explained why the disciples didn't recognize him at first when he came back, because he was appearing as, he's coming as the idea, and they they didn't know that idea, so they had to associate it with what they knew, and then they could see them in part anyway. So
Thank you. Anyone else? Watching point. Well,
What I'm learning, what I've been learning here since coming here is that there is just one body, and it's how we look at it, but it's still the one. We're not trying to change what is already present. It's already true. We're just trying to see it correctly. But the fact that we're not changing a body or anything about it, only our misconception of it is what coming here has really helped me to see.
thank you. Yeah, it exists as a divine idea, and there's not a material body. It's just the one body. And we will always have this body. We will always be recognizable. It's expressed form, color, outline. Zeddy says that. It's also in Martha Wilcox. Those two articles, or three, first Mrs. Eddy's article on body, and then the two by Martha Wilcox, are extremely helpful in your understanding, because many people get bollocksed up on this. And it's what Parthens wrote too, and on his forum, where the Jews couldn't, they thought what was spiritual was material, and vice versa. They couldn't quite get it right. And that was he's quoting from an old edition, from the 1875 edition of Science and Health, where Mrs. Eddy said, for Jesus, that the higher he wrought the problem of being through spiritual science, the more odious he became to the materialistic world that understood him not. So that's why he would say, having eyes, see ye not. Sometimes you can't see. When you're materially minded, you can't see what's really going on. You can't even see the spiritual idea.
And remember, in terms of what is real, it's all divine. Nothing real is material. That's just the way we see things. We're talking about reality. We're talking about what is divine. And the one body is a divine body. Mrs. Eddy says, we all have one Father. That's what one body means. We are all the reflection of the one Father, of the one body. Now, we look different to one another, but that's how we can recognize one another. In other words, it is individualized in us, but there's only one body. We are all part of that one body. That's our brotherhood. That is our unity. And there's nothing else. There aren't a bunch of mortals running around competing with one another or knocking each other over the head.
But we're individualized.
In spirit and not in matter.
Yes.
That is the point. We are individualized as reflections of the one body. And that is what our body is. Mrs. Eddy says, not everybody understands what she means by the word reflection.
And I always go back to this. It's in the Martha Wilcox first article on body, page 59, and I quote it often to you and to people who call for help, but it is, do not fear anything that your present body seems to be doing. Every cell, fiber, tissue, gland, organ, or muscle of the human body exists right now in one mind as idea. And each idea is proclaiming, I am reflecting God, I am expressing God. Every cell and fiber of my being is expressing the sovereignty of God, or proclaiming, I am. So if you're having some difficulty with your body, you give it that treatment, because that's the truth of it. And material body can't speak. It's always mortal mind is the culprit, and mortal mind is your mortal mind thinking, you're worrying about it, your fears, your beliefs, all of that, which has to go. The more spiritually minded you are, your body will be more beautiful, more active, more graceful. Everything about it will be lovely, because that's how God made you. And this goes with our subject today on soul and body. And the golden text, Lillian.
Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers.
So here we go. We let ourselves be subject to those higher powers. Soul with a capital S is in control, and it controls the body. The body doesn't control anything. We come under subjection. That's why I also love in the lesson that we are but restful servants, or humble servants of the restful mind. Think of yourself that way. You're a humble servant of the restful mind. There's peace in those words.
And ask yourself, what are you subjecting? What powers are you subjecting yourself to? What are you giving power to? You're giving power to God that you are the image and likeness of? Or are you giving power to something else other than God that is a false representation of you?
In citation 9, Mrs. Eddy says, Christian Science explains all cause and effect as mental, not physical. It lifts the veil of mystery from soul and body. It shows the scientific relation of man to God, disentangles the interlaced ambiguities of being. I love that.
Yeah.
And sets free the imprisoned thought. In divine science, the universe, including man, is spiritual, harmonious, and eternal. So what does it mean to disentangle the interlaced ambiguities of being? What's an ambiguity?
A doubtfulness or uncertainty of signification. I'm reading what I wrote down.
Thank you.
From a word being susceptible of different meanings.
Yes.
That's doubtfulness. And interlaced, intermixed, inserted with other things.
Yeah.
And disentangles, unravels, unfolds, to loose, separate, or disconnect things which are interwoven or united without order.
Thank you.
Disentangled made me remember my daughter when she was young. She had really long hair, and it would get all tangled up, and I'd have to help her get it undone, and it took so long. So
when that happens, if you push and apply pressure, it makes it work, or worse. You've got to have that gentle touch. That's true if you've ever had a necklace that's gotten all tangled up. You've got to be very gentle and loose it free in a gentle way, or it makes it worse. It tightens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And what does Mrs. Eddy say about mortal existence?
It's an enigma.
It is an enigma. It is a problem without a solution. And that's where the ambiguity comes from. It has no clear definition. No clear meaning. That's because it has no divine exactly. It has no divine meaning at all. When you humanize something, when you try to humanize the divine, whether as your own self or as somebody else, all of a sudden you enter into this belief system, I'll call it, that has no solutions to its problems.
That's why one day it'll say this is a solution, and then, a few months later, something else is a solution. Keeps changing. It's
confusion, that's all.
Yeah, confusion, worse confounded.
But
The truth really is simple.
it is.
It's simply true.
It is. But prove it.
Yeah.
Right. Prove it in your life.
Yeah.
Live it.
If we obeying, if we accept and obey, we will slowly, even if slowly, we'll be doing it.
But this truth, as you come to it, this is what it does to you. It shows your scientific relation of man to God, so that changes. You have a change of base, and you understand your relationship to God
better, anyway.
Yeah, and then these things become disentangled. All your misconceptions. This is what happened to me, and then it sets free that imprisoned thought, where you're just like a hamster running around in circles. You just can't get it. Suddenly you're set free. The last couple of forums that Susan's written about, that's sort of what she was saying. When last week, I think it was first coming to church, how a lot of misconceptions left. And this week too, just listening to the music, right, Susan?
Yeah, the solos here are really beautiful, and I appreciate the Plainfield solos aren't operatic like other churches. And when I was listening to them the other day, I felt so much joy.
Thank you.
Yeah, you felt the love behind them. These are not.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are not professional opera singers. These are Christian scientists who are living the science as best they can and who have love in their heart for it.
And we have two musicians, the organist and our main soloist, Faith, who have not been Christian Scientists, but they are becoming Christian Scientists, which is how things work in our church. Jared said last Wednesday night, who told me that story?
He said he had a headache all day. He felt bad all day.
Migraine.
At the end of the day, at the end of the service, he was perfect.
He was healed. Jared.
And he recognizes that something, something special is going on at each service because he feels it.
Yeah, and Faith does too. Faith is working out a problem, and what would human mind would call it a serious problem, but she just loves coming here. Her mother has told her, well, why do you go to that church or send your child to the Sunday school, all this stuff? She says, Mother, because these people seem to express Christianity more than any other church I've ever been in. And
she brings her son, 10-year-old son, to the Sunday school.
Yes, he's been coming.
And she tells us now that this is her church.
That's nice. Good, wonderful.
Yes. Yeah. And she's struggling. I mean, at times I know, that we talked about this yesterday, understanding the textbook, understanding it, but she feels the touch of it, the spirit listing. She feels that. And that is what should be felt at a church. And someone else said that. Was it yesterday? Was it Susan? Or anyway, someone was saying when they got, I think it was Susan, when you came online, even though we were online, you felt something different.
Yeah, it's amazing, really. You can't even explain it.
Well, thank you. And then others who write on the YouTube have said that too. There's something different here.
Which shows that love has no limitation. It's not contained within the matter that transmits our services. It supersedes it.
It does.
It's because it's the truth. You feel the truth.
And you feel the it. It's got the unction of it. It's not just words, it's a living of it in their lives all week. And then when you come together and you can feel that. And also, all of you have learned to be very humble in your giving of testimonies and speaking. Because if you're arrogant and I've got it and you don't, people feel that. But when all of you freely tell your problems and how that was healed, people are touched by that. That's real.
And when you can do that, you can perform jobs within the church.
Yeah.
At God's direction.
Walk worthy of your vocation.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And be of great use to this cause, which is much, much bigger than any one of us.
And that's always the first test. If you can humble yourself and take correction. Because if you want to do a job here, you might do it perfectly the first time. You might demonstrate it wonderfully, or you might not. and most of us might not. I mean, you can't believe the corrections that all of us got here. So we're very gentle with the corrections. But if you can't do that, usually you take your marbles and go. But if you really love the cause and you love science, you will learn and you will grow and you will bow your head in humility. You'll learn what it means to demonstrate, and that's right.
And your life will show it.
With all lowliness and meekness.
And you'll feel so much better.
You will, because pride is a terrible thing. And we all have it. We've all built it up for various reasons, but it's wonderful to let it go. And it's either you've listened to God or you haven't, and maybe you can do better, and so you just work at it, and it'll bless your whole life, being able to do anything for the church. And it's not easy, as Shardy and Linda have said, when they first came, all hell would break loose every time they try to do anything. So that's overcoming the animal magnetism that would get you to stop it and not do it. Or again, you're building your mental muscles coming through.
And that's what overcometh in Revelation means.
And what did you say? Just reading a watch message, Linda. And that was when you weren't living here, but.
Yes, just doing anything. Sometimes even posting a forum post. Yeah, there's all kinds of things where you try to do. And I got so that I thought, well, mine's unique because I have this problem. But then I would watch other people and they'd be disrupted and their lives were like night and day from mine. So I thought, well, this is totally impersonal. So just get over it.
Get over it is right. Get over it. So.
Right. That it's just impersonal opposition to the Christ and the expression of the Christ that we are all capable of being.
Well, it's wonderful when people persist and get through it. I actually have written that to a lot of people. Thank you for persisting.
Yes.
I know. That's what it's all about here. That, that statement about persistence is more important than genius and talent and everything else. You have to be willing to persist. And as I said, if you really love God, cause, Mary Baker Eddy, you will. That's what kept Mrs. Evans. She could have given up many times. Why bother? All the attacks she was getting and everything, but she loved God and Mrs. Eddy and Christian Science too much. So therefore she endured all kinds of things. And in that endurance, that's where you really grow. That's where you get these mental muscles. You learn how to handle animal magnetism. You learn how to drop to your knees and know that you can do nothing of your own self. The Father that dwelleth in you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think also what used to help me is to remember that whatever I'm doing, if I know that I'm doing it for God, whatever He wants me to do, He will give me the strength, the wisdom, and the fortitude to be able to do it. So the reliance on God present helping me has been very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's absolutely the requirement. Because honestly, you cannot do it. Only God can do it. And it's a matter of getting yourself out of the way.
And it is written, truth persists. Error does not.
Now, in 1 Corinthians, it's Joanne wrote to this, know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? And in her forum, she wrote, because she's been trying to lose weight and trying with willpower and other things. But when you get this thought, and this is true in all that you do, that you are, your definition of body in Science and Health, or definition of temple is body, one of them, that you are this temple of the living God, and you should have a respect for your body and not feel it's out of control or in any way. It's God's body, again, body of Christ. That will maintain a right sense of what you should be, not too big, not too small, just right. There are two really good articles on our website, too, that I can think of at the moment, by Peter V. Ross. One is Liquidation of Poundage, and the other is God Proportions Man. And he writes in such a kindly way, but he says, well, if you cannot resist overeating, try resisting the belief that eating will increase your weight. You see, it is your belief in the matter that works the mischief. Allow the usual appetite will subside when you recognize that the Almighty is in the midst, controlling all your desires, emotions, thoughts, and functions. You know He is so very close to you that He and you are one, which ensures that you can be as sensible and well-disciplined as He is, and that you can no more lose your form divinely fair than can He. Yes, you two are one. He is in you, and you are in Him, all of which spells annihilation to everything opposed to your good looks. Now, without any doubt, when mind and life sally forth in you, they do a very good job. That is, they build you neither too large nor too small, but just about right. Comely and easy to look at, most certainly. Anyway, it's a wonderful article, and he writes in such a sweet way. I love him. And it's a good thought, especially right now with Thanksgiving and everyone thinking about eating and all of that. And so, no, all things in moderation. Just keep it all under His control.
There was a sweet one. My teacher, Christian Science teacher of years ago, she told us of an experience that I thought was really sweet, and I've never forgotten about it. She said that there was once a large woman that she had an appointment to see a practitioner. And she rang the doorbell of the house where the practitioner was, and this little girl answered the door and said that her mommy wasn't there at the moment. She would be coming soon, but would she like to come in and wait in her office? So she said, well, I guess so, if she's not going to be very long. So the little girl took this woman into where her mother had her patients come in and see her. And the little girl had seen her mother and how things, the scene so many times that she sat behind the desk or wherever the chair that her mother would sit in. And she sat down in the chair and looked at the woman and said, so what are you here to see my mother for? What seems to be the problem? And so the woman would share what I just got obviously my problem is I'm overweight. And the little girl said, all she said was, well, God is bigger than you are. And with that, the mother just got up and left and said, well, I'll come back when your mother is here. And she just left. And during the middle of the night, she felt, well, it was explained to me, a shudder, something in her body. And the next morning she woke up and all the weight had just left. It was just completely gone. And that was it. And I've just never forgotten that the scene of that little girl who saw nothing except the presence of God and said, well, God's bigger than you are. God's bigger than, and just that innocence, and didn't see what everybody else was seeing or what the patient saw in herself. And that was it. I've just never forgotten that. So
thank you. Yes. It's beautiful.
And why not?
And why not?
Well, didn't Jesus say, Man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God, who is much bigger than any of us.
Yeah.
And the hymn, fed by thy love divine, right? We live.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
And-
that's something to remember during these so-called holiday times, when you're meeting with maybe family or friends. What is it that you have to offer? What is the most valuable thing you have to offer? It's not the food that you prepare. It's the Christ that you live and express. So you don't have to stuff people with a lot of food to show your love for them.
Or get all uptight about, everything being perfect or whatever else, however else it comes to you. It's the peace, the love, the Christliness that are just a little bit with a peaceful sense. And
that is the most valuable thing you can feed your guests with.
yes, the Christ truth. Absolutely. Mrs. Evans was once a very, very large woman. And it was when she decided it was not representative of her to look like that she lost a huge amount of weight. And she did it without dieting. She just used a few ideas. God proportions man. And she would ask herself, is this appetite?
Hunger or appetite.
Yeah, hunger or appetite.
Whenever she would walk by the refrigerator.
Yeah, when she would walk by the refrigerator, we said one more.
God proportions.
Oh yeah, God proportions me. God proportions me. Those three statements. So, Suzanne, you wrote too about cleansing. She's on now, right?
Yes.
Cleansing. I don't know if you'd like to add anything to this discussion.
Well, it was just really neat how the word sanctify just popped out of and I said, I'm going to look that up. And it says, in a general sense, to cleanse, purify, or make holy, to prepare for divine service and for partaking of holy things. That was in the 1828 Webster Dictionary. And then I thought of cleansing. It's such a fad now. Everyone wants to cleanse their bodies. And now, of course, they're saying some cleanses are bad and watch out, So I thought, just that's all a bunch of poppycock. Because just if we focus on God and just let the Spirit cleanse our body, the temple of the Lord, it's just so much easier. And we're purified and prepared for divine service. Just take that idea of cleansing and lift it up as a divine idea. And I just thought it was so freeing from, if the whole world is saying we need to be cleansed, what is it saying? We're all dirty.
Yes.
But the truth is, just focusing on God, and it's in that passage, that beautiful passage in Thessalonians that starts with rejoice evermore, pray without ceasing. And then at the end, then the very God of peace sanctify you wholly. What more can we want? What more can we need than that purification of just being one with the Lord? I just thought that was just so wonderful to look at the word sanctify, and I was just inspired by that. So
yes,
Thank
and
you.
it's holy spiritual. This is again all of these, everything, these cleanses, everything is looking to matter for answers, and it's not there. As you serve God, sanctify yourself for His holy purpose. That's how you cleanse and purify,
And that's why.
it goes along with Romans. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And that, to me, goes with hymn number 324. Take my life and let it be consecrated, Lord, to thee. Work with that hymn all the time, every day. Then you won't have problems with your body when you're living that hymn. Go ahead.
I think also with the heaviness, I've read also where heavy thoughts, living day to day with those heavy burdened thoughts doesn't help even physically, because consciousness, our bodies reflect our consciousness. So the heavy thoughts must be rid of also.
Thank you. Yeah, Mrs. Evans' article about losing weight was called Burden Thought. Yeah, it is a heavy, kind of a dark, heavy thought. Thank you, Florence.
And that's why we should never look to our body to see if we're healthy or not.
Yeah.
To see if we're well or not. And we should never look to our material possessions to see if we're happy or not. We should look into our consciousness, into our thinking. That is what tells us whether we are happy or healthy. Because health is a what does Mrs. Eddy say? It's a
health is not in matter; it is in mind. It is in mind, and that's such a wonderful, wonderful thought. If it is in mind, it can never be tampered with. You can't have a problem. You can't get the flu. You can't get the nameless nothing. It's in mind. It's impossible. That's where your health is. It exists as a quality, but you need to be living and obeying and following him. He demands our entire obedience, Mrs. Eddy says. You can't do this and do anything you want and expect to reap the blessings, which brings us to a beautiful forum from Elizabeth. Elizabeth? Okay, Elizabeth, you want to speak to what you wrote about on the forum?
Well, yeah, it was the citation in Deuteronomy that says, "And all these blessings shall come on you and overtake you if you listen to the voice of the Lord your God." And it was just that word overtake. It just struck me because, it just shows that God's blessings are infinite and they just never stop. They just are continuous, and they don't dry up. And of course, that is if we listen to the voice of the Lord and are obedient to him. And that's the important part. But one of the Bible commentaries said, "Those blessings which others greedily follow after and oftentimes never overtake, they shall follow after thee and shall be thrown into thy lap by my special kindness, if thou shalt hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God." And I just thought that was really...
That is just beautiful. Yes. And how true. And all you have to do is observe it. You see people running greedily after things, and they might have stuff for a while, but eventually it leads to total despair, destruction, doesn't bring any happiness. And then those that are just working to serve God, it is that overtake them, because we do have such a loving, generous God, and as Florence wrote, inexhaustible blessings. There's no limit. We have an ample, generous God. He doesn't just dole out a penny here and a penny there. He loves us.
But what is the state of thought that is required to hearken diligently and let the blessings overtake you?
Gratitude.
Humble.
Thank you. Humility, yep, and gratitude. Yes. Those are required. Humility is not an optional. It's it's not optional. It's required.
Thank you.
I wanted to say that when people talk about listen to God, we used to think, what is that? But you said it, Gary, on Wednesday when you were listening, that if you get calm and quiet and still and open your heart, that meant a lot.
Yeah, because God is speaking to us, but it requires the humility to let God overtake you. I mean, a lot of people fight this, don't they?
Yes.
You know,
And
they fight the still small voice of truth.
That's why Mrs. Eddy says humility is the stepping stone to a higher recognition of deity.
Thank you. Yes. And it is lens and prism. If you want the light to shine within you, it is the only way. A lot of people will even resist the blessings that God gives them. They'll say, well, it's too good to be true. Or, you have to take the bad with the good. So something good happens, people will say, okay, now what, when's the other shoe going to drop? Or, that sort of thing. That kind of attitude invites defeat.
But sometimes set their own goals so firmly that they can't yield to what God would give.
Exactly. Thank you. It is the willful, arrogant, human belief that thinks it's smarter than God.
Yeah, well, and they don't, it's the idea they don't want to lose control. They have no trust of God, so they just want to control it themselves, control their children, control their lives, their finances. It's total control. They're not in control. They feel insecure or something. Instead, they have to transfer that to God and know He's got it all in control. So there's something in the lesson I want to get to before I get to the First Thessalonians, which is so beautiful. It's in Science and Health, where Mrs. Eddy says that immortality is not bounded by mortality. Soul is not compassed by finiteness. Principle is not to be found in fragmentary ideas. Now, Mrs. Eddy speaks to this in the book, Mary Baker Eddy, 6 Days of Revelation, on 257. This idea of fragmentary ideas. And I believe we had a lot of this in our Liberator on New Age, but she says, all religions, Mohammedan, Buddhist, Christian, and others, have some good in them, but they do not have the whole. There is a little truth in all creeds, isms, and ologies. But if we try to find the truth in part of the vessel, we get cut. Just as when we break a bottle, we get cut by the fragments, never the whole vessel. The remedy is to study the Bible in Science and Health and leave the fragments alone. Now, so often they'll hear, oh, well, there's truth to Buddhism, there's truth. And yes, there is truth. There's truth to all. There is truth. But science is the divine whole. It's the whole thing. It covers all the ground. And that is why it is so unique, so divine, and so important. And then she says, of the other current authors, Ursula Gestefeld is the most dangerous and most subtle. And why? And it was New Age, okay? She was New Age, and she existed in Mrs. Eddy's time because she voices enough truth to deceive the very elect, then poisons the whole with her terrible theosophical terms. It is not personality she attacks, because she would attack Mrs. Eddy, but truth. Those, like Mrs. Gettefield, who undertake to explain and simplify science and health would be better employed in its study and demonstrate what they find in it, and demonstrate what they find in it, and demonstrate what they find in it. We must not attempt to write another Bible or another Science and Health, and I think we talked about this yesterday, and we must not take it upon ourselves to write for the publications unless led by truth. Of all the schools that truth has to correct, the theological school is the most bitter enemy. It would crucify in the harshest manner and will be the last to yield. It is worse than medicine. Liberated mortal mind is the red dragon of revelation. The time is coming, indeed, is here now, when we need not to go places to do evil, to poison, to murder and steal, to do all manner of evil. Such evil may be done in and through mortal mind. Never was there a time when hell is so apparent and crime so subtle and so terrible. Okay. She was talking about then, we're talking about now. So this is it, how the mortal mind comes into your home and makes you believe that the truth is a lie and the lie is the truth. Stand porter at the door of thought and don't get into these fragmentary things. It's science. Stick to your Bible and science and health. And again, what we have, the early workers, is the creme de la creme. Many people are sending us things now, for our library, and some of that's good and it's maybe good to have on hand. But as far as studying it, I'm not into that. I'm into the early workers, and that's only after Mrs. Eddy and the Bible. Now, we will get into the beautiful 1 Thessalonians until we close. The first, rejoice evermore. What did John Adams say?
I just love that at the end of the John Adams series when he was older. He got really happy and he just said, rejoice evermore. And he said something like, I wish this was always in my heart and on my lips, or something like that.
Yeah, this was in the latter days of his life. And he was just laughing with such joy. He said, I wish I had lived my whole life this way. Evermore. It doesn't pick and choose when you're going to rejoice. Always, even if you're going through a tough trial, especially if you're going through a tough trial. Pray without ceasing. Well, we talk about all these a lot, but everything you do, everywhere you go, you pray. You have a choice. You can be worried. You can be in the human mind, or you can pray.
And that's true humility. It keeps you in true humility.
Thank you. Thank you. To surrender your consciousness to God alone. Recognize God alone as the only power that you should surrender yourself to. And when you do, you find yourself. You don't lose anything.
And I was so struck when I came here because to see Mrs. Evans in operation, I'd never seen it look like that before. You didn't go to the movies without prayer. You didn't make a meal without prayer. You didn't do anything without prayer. And if something wasn't right, you prayed about it. The smallest thing. You didn't accept anything but God's will. This is learning to live it. This is the demonstration of it, which is prove all things and hold fast to that which is good. You've got to prove it, which is what I read a few minutes ago. Demonstrate it. Otherwise, you won't understand it. Prove all things and hold fast that which is good. Hang on to the good and reject what's not right. But I skipped then. In everything, give thanks. We're having Thanksgiving this weekend, this week, and we hope you all join us on Thanksgiving. But it's always, in everything, give thanks. Always return it to the source, being God good. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, that simple thing of finding a parking space. Well, anything that happens, thank God.
And when you are grateful to God for what he gives, you will never lose it. You can't never lose what God gives you if you're grateful for it.
It's a connection. And then this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. This is God's will. These are things you need to do. It's not an option, all right? If you want to live a truly scientific life. And then this one, quench not the spirit. What does it mean to quench?
Not to put out.
To put out. And in Matthew Henry, he says, Christians are baptized with the Holy Ghost and fire. Fire is put out by withdrawing fuel. So when you stop fueling yourself, when you stop praying, when you stop feeling the Spirit in you, you're putting out, you're quenching that Spirit. And it's also by pouring water on it or dirt on it. And Matthew Henry says, in indulging the carnal lusts and minding earthly things, you were putting dirt on the Spirit. You're quenching it, and then you wonder where it went. The Spirit is that voice that's always speaking to you. And you're either listening to it in all your prayer and demonstration, or you're quenching it. You're putting it out, oh, I don't believe that, or I don't have time for this, or I don't want to do that, or that can't be God talking to me. And you just pour more and more water on that. And pretty soon, the Spirit seems, in belief, be quenched.
And that's what it means to humanize the divine idea, or to, quote, materialize the divine idea.
And then despise not prophesying. Don't be like who there was someone in the Bible got really mad. He wanted the prophet to prophesy, and then when he said something, I don't want to hear that. Listen to what God is telling you, and don't say I don't want to hear that. You got to hear it. Some people say, well, I don't know, is this God or not? Well, you do know. Ultimately, you know. We were created to hear God's voice. Whether you want to listen to it or not is something else. And that's true in our world, in our politics, everything. God speaks. Listen. And despise not. If he's telling you something just because it's not exactly what you think you want to hear, well, again, then you're quenching that voice. You're quenching the Spirit. You've got to listen. You have to be open. As Shardy said about Gary, have an open mind. And then open mind by that, a peaceful, quiet, listening state of thought. And then abstain from all evil appearances. This is a big one today because people think they can do things and go to parties and flirt and carry on and do things like that. And that keeps them from, as long as they don't go too far with it. Well, no. It starts that way. You abstain from it. That includes pornography. That includes all this stuff that's rampant right now. And then what happens is wonderful. The very God of peace sanctify you wholly. And that's what Suzanne spoke to. So this is a wonderful, wonderful recipe for success, shall I say, for success in living your science. Think about it. Think about it even more than what we said. And live it. Let it become you. So now we will... Florence, did you want to say anything before we close?
No, I didn't. I wasn't saying anything.
Okay. All right. We're going to end on the most wonderful new birth, which goes to Nicodemus. And if you missed the wonderful class that Susan moderated yesterday, Bible study, please listen. It was so good. Okay, go ahead.
This is from the new birth. The prominent laws which forward birth in the divine order of science are these. Quote, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Love thy neighbor as thyself. End quote. These commands of infinite wisdom, translated into the new tongue, their spiritual meaning, signify, thou shalt love spirit only, not its opposite, in every God quality, even in substance. Thou shalt recognize thyself as God's spiritual child only, and the true man and true woman, the all-harmonious male and female, as of spiritual origin, God's reflection. Thus, as children of one common parent, wherein and whereby father, mother, and child are the divine principle and divine idea, even the divine us, one in good and good in one. He who has named the name of Christ, who has virtually accepted the divine claims of truth and love in divine science, is daily departing from evil, and all the wicked endeavors of suppositional demons can never change the current of that life from steadfastly flowing onto God, its divine source.
Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.